America is the single greatest entity on the earth for the past 250 years. And God bless the framers for putting it together and for all the people who have fought and died for it over the past 250 years, because we are luckier than anyone who has any idea can imagine. We're just making it better all the time.
Steve Michaels has a 35-year career in communications and defense industries as a master's degree electrical engineer. He has earned a professional engineer license, a project management professional certification, and certified Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. Defense Acquisition Professional Engineer Level 3. He is a 29-year retired U.S. Navy Reserve 06 and a veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Steve is also a 47-year semi-professional keyboardist, guitarist, and singer.
Welcome, Stephen Michaels.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm excited to talk to you. And I have to start off right away because recently, in the last couple of years, you retired 29 years of service with United States Navy Reserve. Thank you for your service.
Thanks. It's my duty. Greatest country in the world.
It is. It is indeed. Now, they say, or you could say, that Navy reservists never give up being battle ready. They just find new battles. Tell me about an organization you volunteer for. STARRS, STARRS.
Sure. Colonel Lohmeyer got fired from his position. And when that happened, a group of retired Air Force Academy, mostly officers that lived mostly around Colorado, but also around the country, banded together to try to support him and to fight against what had become what we'll call an infection in the military. It's hard to find other words to describe what has happened to us in the U.S., but we'll just say that of all the institutions in the U.S. government that people don't expect to fall apart or fall below standards, the military is probably at the top of that list. It was the most trusted institution for the longest time, and for very good reason. But what's happened in the past 20 years, roughly, or 15 years mostly, is this disease that started to spread in the civilian population across the academic institutions, across corporations, which I worked at. While I was in my Navy Reserve job, I worked at both Motorola and Northrop Grumman for a long time. And I saw this creeping kind of DEI culture. And eventually it made its way over to the military. And so that is what happened. By the time it got into the military, one of the last standard, institutions with merit-based standards, it really took hold with a number of people who were, for lack of a better term, trained Marxists. And that terminology tends to scare people or turn them off. Use the word Marx. Most people don't know the truth about, who Karl Marx was, or his friend Engels, or, how they interacted, what happened to their families, and so on and so on. All we know from history is that the philosophical ideas that they put forth, in the manifesto that they put out, killed about 100 million people in the last 100 years. And so those concepts, those thoughts are championed, believe it or not, by a number of organizations around the world, and they have chapters operating in the United States today that continue to push these philosophies regardless of the history. It's amazing to me, but it's out there, it's happening, it's real. And when it infected the military, it was particularly noticeable because those concepts are antithetical to the merit-based, high standards type of organization that our U.S. military is. So back to Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer, this group of fellas that got together, and they're all retired, very high-ranking people, colonels, generals, some admirals. They banded together with graduates of not just the Air Force Academy, but also of West Point, of the Navy Academy, the Coast Guard Academy. And they started to meet regularly and pull together an organization that started to collect detailed information and interviews with cadets at the various academies that were testifying, through affidavits. I immediately volunteered to be the state leader for Arizona, where I live. And I've been giving talks at various organizations around the state and trying to find other ways to get the word out. It's become a lot easier on us. The urgency kind of went down a little bit because of the election of Trump. When that happened in November of 2024, we all breathed a sigh of relief because now we knew we had the right people in office with the power to be able to go after these people in the Pentagon and in the military and academies and start to hold them accountable for what they were doing, which was essentially weakening our military in a number of ways. So I joined them, the STARRS organization. It's STARRS, Stand Together Against Racism and Radicalism in the Services. And Matt Lohmeyer, as it turns out, once President Trump took office, Matt Lohmeyer was able to get in the conversation of the folks that were being bandied around to become directors and cabinet members and various things. So the next thing you know, Matt Lohmeyer went before the Senate to be approved, and he is now today the Undersecretary of the Air Force. So he's now in a position where he's actually over the very generals who fired him just a couple years ago, and in a position to do some good and hopefully bring us back to a level playing field. But it's a great time, at least for now. The past year has been great to watch real leadership and real smart people who understand what the U.S. military exists for. Its purpose is to fight and win wars. That's it. There's no social agenda. There's no reason to talk or do anything about anything else. All of that silliness that they were making people go through for years that we captured on the STARRS website. People can go there and watch all the videos and read all of this testimony from kids who basically quit. They would spend all of their lives becoming who they were and getting accepted to the Air Force Academy, which is not an easy task. And they would get there and see what was going on with all of this identitarian politics and pitting people against each other based on race and sex and whatever else. And they were quitting. And that's why, and this is fact-based, you knew from watching the news that all of the military branches, all the services were having great difficulty meeting recruiting numbers for the past 4 years. And it was during that administration that most of that trouble really, really flared up. It started, the word DEI, acronym DEI, and the words, woke and identity politics really started to flare up about 15 years ago. But people didn't notice it as much back then. It was not until the pandemic in 2020 and the election that things really, really started to accelerate. They just took off. And so we in the STARRS organization, and there's a lot of us spread across the country, volunteers and ex-military, but also civilian people willing to help fight this fight to get our military back. We do what we do with great hope, and we're making progress. I can tell you Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was get rid of those Small Business Administration 8A programs, they call them. And those were essentially DEI-based contract letting programs that were funneling billions of dollars to businesses based on supposed status as disadvantaged or, women-owned or whatever. And they knew, and we all knew, for many, many years that people were playing games in order to get those contracts. So they would just put somebody in a position to say this person's the head of such and such company, but the real company was being run by other people and the money was flowing and billions of dollars. So thank God Pete Hegseth got rid of that. That's going to save us, billions in the long run, and also had us even further down that path of getting rid of these terrible divisive policies that have infected the military, one piece at a time, really. And I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm doing all I can out here in Arizona, and we're looking for people, to just help get the word out. That's really the bottom line of what our mission has changed, right? With President Trump, the mission is a little different now because the urgency is not there like it was for the past 4 years. Our mission was to fight this evil inside the Pentagon and at the academies. But now with President Trump, our mission has become more legal based. We have actual lawyers on staff, military lawyers, retired guys, very sharp. They're working on hundreds and hundreds of cases of military members who you might remember were kicked out because they refused to take the COVID shot. And they were kicked out or for other reasons, like Matt Lohmeyer, because they refused to fall in line with the DEI nonsense. So the legal battles are going on right now, real time. And one by one, we're slowly gaining these people their careers back. Folks lost their careers. I have friends in the Navy that were brave enough to not take the shot. God bless them. They lost their careers and they're still fighting it to this day, and it's very hard to put in words what happens when you lose faith in your own government and you watch what the government under the other administration was willing to do to people. But that's what we're all about. Anyway, so that's my, in a nutshell, on the STARRS organization, and stars.us is the website. I hope folks go look at it.
Just to recap what I heard you saying, I heard you say that you want people to be advanced in their rank based on qualifications to hold the jobs, because their jobs are literally life and death. Because someone shouldn't be promoted in their rank, given responsibility based solely to make a requirement to have so many of a certain race or certain gender or gender affiliation. And some groups do not trust that the military would do that on their own, that they would not let people of certain races or genders move ahead because of their race or gender. And there needs to be, so one group doesn't believe they'll do it on their own, and one group believes they have to shove it. And there needs to be a realistic trust that the military wants to win wars. So whoever best will be the one who is given the responsibility to keep people alive. That's what I hear you saying in a nutshell.
Okay. Bingo. That says it.
All right. So I wanted to ask you about something that you did. You went to Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan is landlocked. What was the Navy doing in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I got that question from folks I worked with at the time. I was working at Northrop Grumman. This is about 15 years ago I was there. And it's not because there's a giant lake somewhere in the middle of Afghanistan. It's because during the war, especially the early part of the war, there weren't enough active duty personnel in all of the services. That total, is about a million and a half folks across the U.S. in the active duty services, another roughly million in the Reserve and National Guard to add to that. And so they were pulling individual augmentees, it's called IA, from the Navy, and in particular from the Navy Reserve component, not the active. Why? Because they were already shorthanded on active duty personnel on the ships. We have 300 ships at sea, and so you need folks, to man all of those posts, and most of those ships were going to sea shorthanded all the time. So they couldn't afford to just yank them from there and send them over to Iraq or Afghanistan. So the reserve took the brunt of that, about 100%, of the IA fills, they call them, under Operation Noble Eagle. Those were Navy reservists. And each community, which is a job description, under the banner of in the Navy. I'm an engineering officer. For what that's worth, if you had a pie chart, it's about 1% of all the officer branches in the military. You know, the biggest branch is the surface warfare guys, the ones that are ship drivers and submarine drivers. So mine is a pretty small group, but you know, there were 300 or so of us at the time. Um, and they just did a spreadsheet and just put everybody in an order of when the last time they had deployed anywhere before that or how long they had been in the unit. You know, I got picked in 2009, so I went. And I went to Afghanistan, not Iraq, although my orders originally had me going to Iraq. That job was actually pulled before I got there, so my job changed suddenly, you know, a couple months before I deployed to Afghanistan. And I'm glad it did, um, for a lot of reasons. The biggest one is, you know, I got the chance to interact with the Scout program while I was there.
You write about that on your blog, which
Right,
is the website Major Foobar at wordpress.com, the
right.
website you see there. And you write about the scouting program and the flight day or rocket day. Rocket day. So you do write
Yeah,
about
Rocket
that.
Rocket
And you
Derby
show
Day.
a picture of a really creepy spider. I don't know why you have that on there, because it's a creepy spider.
That was in my bedroom, if you can call it a bedroom, as a Connex box. But
My
that's what
husband
we.
had the same kind of living accommodations, I believe, when he was there.
Yeah,
It didn't improve over the years. I think he went in 2015 and you went in 2009. Yeah.
yeah, not much different. I think when I was leaving in 2010, they were starting to build more accommodations, more restaurants, things like that to make it a little more comfortable. But for the most part, it's still Afghanistan. And sadly, today, after the pullout in August of 2021, it's pretty much right back to the Stone Age where it was when we went in there 20 years ago. More than 20 years ago now, 25. Yeah, it's good on one hand because of the interaction with the boys, the orphanage that I went to all the time with the NGOs, and on the other hand, it's a lot of bad memories of how people are treated and how how corrupt and really just not very appealing these guys are that are running the place there because they're not a legitimate government. They're just narco terrorists and they just happen to be in charge. I feel bad for the women and children. As I did when I was there, I feel worse now after 2021. It's far worse.
So, on that difficult note, I get kind of sad about other people. So, you have to excuse me.
That's okay. I do too.
But when we complain about America's situation, what does that do to you when you've seen up close other situations that are so nasty and devastating? What do you hear when you hear the buzzing of whining and complaining?
It's uh, it's easy for me to deflect any of that stuff, and I really feel like I just want to educate anybody that tries to tell me or speak in any kind of earshot of me so that I hear them. If they're not happy with something going on in America, they really need to travel, period. Even before I was in Afghanistan for many years, I had a career where I was traveling the globe, working in factories all over the world for Motorola. And I have friends, in other countries to this day. And for the most part, those countries are fairly civilized, obviously, because we had business going on there. But once you've seen other parts of the world and you start to dig in and find out what it's like to actually live there, not just be a tourist, and then you take it a step further and go to third world nations like Afghanistan, which are far worse than probably anyone I know has ever seen. Even in the worst countries they can think of in, let's say Africa or South America, there are some countries that are, the living is pretty rough, but Afghanistan is the Stone Age. And it's hard to describe. But any of these folks that have a problem with America, yeah, my tendency is not to get angry because I'm just far too experienced and too old for that. My first inclination is to want to train and educate folks and just teach them, this here's 1,000 reasons why America is the single greatest entity on the earth for the past 250 years. And God bless the framers for putting it together and for all the people who have fought and died for it over the past 250 years, because we are luckier than anyone who has any idea can imagine. We're just making it better all the time. Some of us, anyway. I know there are forces in this country trying to make it worse. I don't know why, but most of us are trying to make it better every day. And so that's what I would say, to folks like that. Educate them, and that's about it. I'm going to keep going and just keep helping other people like I've been doing as much as I can. Around the community, I've also dove in where I live now in Arizona and become kind of the captain of the neighborhood, and I help people, whatever they need, and it's just kind of who I am. It defines me, and I get it that from how I was raised by my mom and dad, both Army veterans. They met in the Army, and hard to describe how much love I have for my dad, who passed away in 2019, and my mom, who's still alive. They are the reason that I'm able to be sitting here now, healthy and, fairly successful and still going. I owe it all to the way they raised me. And thanks for having me.
Your time is finite. Your energy is valuable. Your talents are unique. Invest them intentionally. Intent on Purpose podcast with host Laura Hansen Breksa. Listen, learn, lead with intention. Your time is finite. Your energy is valuable. Your talents are unique. Invest them intentionally. If a story moved you, if a lesson helped you grow, subscribe, share, like, comment. Help more purpose-driven people know. Your time is finite. Your energy is valuable. Your talents are unique. Invest them intentionally. Intent on Purpose with Laura Hansen Breksa.